Hi, I'm Stewart Spinks and welcome to episode 388 of my podcast, Beekeeping Short and Sweet. First inspections, such an exciting moment in the season. An opportunity to have a quick look at how our colonies have coped with the long winter months. This is just what I did during the week, and it was a mixed bag as ever. Beekeeping Short and Sweet, a beekeeping podcast for the inquisitive beekeeper with a short attention span. A beekeeper, in fact, just like me. Hi everyone, welcome back to an exciting weekly podcast because I've opened a couple of hives. Yes, it's that time of the year again, folks, when we all get a little overly excited and leap into action, donning our bee suits, grabbing our pristinely cleaned, looking like new smokers, take our brand new, freshly painted hive tools out of their plastic sleeves, and race to the bottom of the garden to start inspecting our bees. Well, maybe not quite that excitable, but I know that some of you are. Okay, I am. I appreciate that some of you might think he's talking nonsense. Beekeeping for as many years as I have, surely it becomes routine and not at all exciting. Well, I think I'm blessed with a hunger for beekeeping that far surpasses any other hobby or career I've ever had. And yes, I really do get excited each and every time the new season comes around. So much so that on numerous occasions I've leapt into an inspection without zipping up my veil and paid the painful price. Yep, several stings on the face, head and neck over the years. You'd think it would have taught me a lesson. Not the slightest. Excitement gets the better of me, and the rest is a painful reminder for that season to grab for the zip. I'll talk some more about my first inspections in a few minutes. I found some interesting situations that needed attention, and for those of you who watch my videos on Patreon, it's useful for me to be able to explain a little more of my thinking and perhaps expand on some of the things I spoke about during the inspections that you have watched on my videos. My brain doesn't always catch up with my inspections to be able to tell you all of the things that I'm focusing on and thinking about as I complete those inspections. It's the old situation of me trying to do 2 or 3 things at once and, let's face it, where I'm concerned, probably not succeeding. March can be a tricky month for both beekeepers and honeybees alike. Just this last week has been a perfect example of the way in which the weather can challenge us. One day it's the warmest day of the year so far, and then another cold, misty and grey. The week's weather last week was just the kind of roller coaster that can encourage beekeepers into their bee suits and out for inspections, and throw a chilly breeze through the apiary to chill the brood, and that can happen faster than maybe you think. Celia Davis, in her excellent book, The Honeybee Inside Out, explains that brood nest temperatures need to be around 34.5 degrees Celsius in order to maintain healthy growth of larvae into adult bees. It's probably far more complex and sensitive than we know, and as usual, with no personal science to back up my following statement, it does seem logical to me that as egg turns to larvae and the larvae develops through the various stages of growth, the dependence on tight temperature control is relaxed, and once cells are capped, the developing bee inside is able to produce some of its own warmth and therefore protection. All of that said, at this time of the year, we are hoping, willing even, our colonies to produce lots of brood and go on to get bigger and stronger and healthier, and maybe, for most of us, produce a bumper crop of honey. As eternal optimists, beekeepers know that this year may be the best year yet. Early inspections performed at the wrong time, however, or without giving due consideration to the effects of what that early inspection might have on our colonies, can, and often do, have detrimental effects on brood and the subsequent development of that colony. And that's thinking just in terms of healthy bees. The impact on a small to medium colony struggling, for instance, with nosema could be catastrophic. If you've ever read a beekeeping book, the chapter about bee pests and diseases will often cite chilled brood. Chilled brood can be caused by several reasons, but I would suggest beekeeper enthusiasm is one of the biggest causes of this not particularly fatal challenge. We've already established that the brood nest needs something in the order of 34.5 degrees Celsius to maintain growth and development of healthy brood. I enjoyed a lovely afternoon of beekeeping just this week. Here I'm thinking of the weather conditions, not what I found in the hives, but more of that in a moment. Lovely beekeeping weather conditions in a sheltered apiary at my fishing lake site, yet the temperature was only 16 degrees Celsius. I say only 16 degrees Celsius, but that's less than half the temperature my brood nest needs. It sounds like we're already in a temperature deficit. Best be quick about this inspection. Add to this that not everyone has the benefit of a sheltered sun trap of an apiary. The temperature curve can nosedive very rapidly. A cool easterly breeze with some late Arctic chill can soon pull the feel of the temperature down rapidly, and with it, young larvae suffering the consequences of a beekeeper's meandering first inspection. So, for those of you who haven't yet jumped in, well done. For those of you about to begin, just pick your moment for inspecting and consider your local conditions that may adversely affect your colonies. Having said all that, we do need to begin inspections. We do need to check in to look for a laying queen, expanding brood nests, adequate food stores. So I'm absolutely not saying don't inspect. I'm advocating a common sense approach with an understanding of the effect your opening of that hive might have on that colony. And if you're not particularly familiar with honeybee biology, take some time to just read a book or two. There's time enough yet for inspections, and the start of the beekeeping season for many in the UK is still some way off. But for some, myself included, oilseed rape plants are starting to flower, and if you have colonies nearby, they can soon fill up brood box cells with nectar and pollen, with the resulting lack of space being a catalyst for reproduction, if you know what I mean. So, my inspections this week. Let me take you through my thought processes as to why I inspected and what I inspected, and what I found and what I did as a result. I had 3 colonies specifically that I wanted to look at. Just 3 colonies at this apiary out of 30 in total, and very specific reasons for wanting to look at them. Those of you who have watched my videos will know exactly the 3 because you'll have maybe seen them already. Colony number 1. This colony spent the late autumn and early winter building brace comb on the underside of a clear coverboard that was on top of a super being used as an eek, and they'd filled it with ivy honey. A week or so ago, time slips, doesn't it, I wanted to check in on them with a view to removing that brace comb and super before they really got going. What I found was a colony that was close to starving, having hefted them and been alarmed by just how light the hive felt. Rather than remove the super and brace comb, I added a kilo bag of fondant, or thereabouts. The fondant worked a treat, the bees survived well, and with the warmth of the spring sunshine, were able to get out and forage, and boy did they forage. Not only did they forage, but they got incredibly busy with their brood nest. The brood nest had spread through the brood box and moved up into that brace comb suspended from the coverboard. The brace comb had been extended and was mostly filled with brood in all stages, the vast majority of it being worker brood. I did spot some drone brood though, so it won't be long before we have drones. So, where was my head at during this inspection? Initially, I had intended to check they had survived, add more fondant if necessary, or if they had enough food stores, remove that super and brace comb. Obviously, a change of plan was required, or perhaps I sacrificed the brood in the brace comb and bring everything back together, removing the super and leaving it as a single brood box. The other option going through my mind was the addition of another brood box, using my double brood system for spring growth. The trouble is, I hate destroying spring worker brood. The colony is coming out of winter, older bees are dying off and need replacing with spring bees. But also, we're looking for the colony to have an increase in size, so I'm always reluctant to get rid of this valuable hive resource. There appeared to be enough adult worker bees to sustain the brace comb brood. The colony had several frames on the outside of the brood box that didn't have brood in, and so my thought process led me to decide to add a second brood box on top of the original brood box and replace the super on top of that. My hope is that there are enough bees to create a channel of growth between the bottom brood box through that middle brood box with the frames of foundation and connect with the brood in the brace comb at the top. It's called a chimney. Now there is an element of risk here. If it turns really cold, the brood at the top could become separated from the adults beneath and chill. But my assessment is that we should be okay. So now I have a double brood setup with a chunk of additional brood at the very top in some brace comb. My next trip will see the addition of a queen excluder, if everything has survived, and hopefully a very large colony ready for the oilseed rape crop in April, not that far away. Hive number 2, an undersupered Langstroth colony. The one question that's been asked of me more than probably any other in the last fortnight is when can I take off my super that I put under the brood box last autumn. So this is where beekeepers place a partially filled or full super between the brood box and the floor, lifting the brood box higher in the hive setup, away from cold and damp winds over the winter period, and also giving the colony additional food stores. We get to the early part of spring and look to move that super out and back above the brood box. But when can we do that? I get the feeling that the beekeepers I speak to mostly want to do it because of fear the queen is going to dash down into the super and lay eggs in it, causing challenges for that beekeeper looking to inspect and reuse the super for a spring honey crop. The first thing to say is that if the queen does lay in the super, it's not the end of the world. We can always move the super, complete with eggs and brood, back above a queen excluder and allow it to emerge. The important part here is to make sure that the queen remains in the brood box. And if you don't find her, you'll know during the next inspection, because there'll either be eggs in the super or eggs in the brood box, and then you can work accordingly. One of the usual results I find with this process is exactly what I found during this inspection. The colony had reduced in size over winter, they had used all of the stores in the super, and the queen was laying really well in the brood box, but there was absolutely no activity in that bottom super. In fact, the only activity in there was a few slugs that had taken up residence and were chomping their way through a frame of wax. The inspection was quick and easy. A little smoke across the brood box. No, not too much here, otherwise you can drive the queen down into the super. But the brood box is lifted off the super and placed on the upturned roof. The super checked quickly and removed from the floor and placed behind the hive. This prevents hundreds of bees gathering in and on that super, making it more difficult to clear it of bees before the next part of the process. The brood box is then lifted back onto the floor and quickly inspected. You could take a moment just to scrape the floor clean of any dead bees that may be there from overwintering. Now you have a decision to make, as I did. Is the colony so large that it needs the additional space? By removing the super, am I causing a congestion issue for myself and the bees? Is the super in good enough condition to go back on the hive? These are just a few of the questions that were going through my mind as I inspected. For this colony, they didn't need the super this week. There was room enough for them to grow, room enough for food to be foraged and stored, and time enough for me to go away, clean up the super a little bit, and bring it back with a queen excluder. So that's what I did. The hive was settled quickly, and I'll visit next week perhaps with equipment to let them grow further. Maybe we'll reuse that super by adding the queen excluder, or maybe, if they're large enough, we might add another brood box. Finally, the third colony. Not quite dead, but close to it. In fact, I had thought them dead when I first spotted they were in trouble. These were on a double brood box setup over winter. They were quite a strong colony really, yet they had dwindled to almost nothing. A single frame of brood, if that. The cause? Varroa. I'm pretty certain of it. My brain was saying, shake them out and take the hive away, but my heart was saying, well, there's a laying queen. They could be cared for and survive. Being a sentimental old fool, I opted to try to help them. The trick with this process is to reduce them back down, not just to a single brood box, but further still into a small nuke. It's a Langstroth hive, so a single honey pour nuke box gives them 4 frames to survive on, far better than the cold 20 frames of a double brood box setup. They had plenty of flying bees out and about, so food stores weren't going to be a problem. Here they needed to be moved across into that nuke box quickly. I didn't want to chill them further. Luckily, the sun trap that this apiary is provided plenty of warm afternoon sunshine for them. My plan is to head back with a thymol treatment for them to try to knock down as many Varroa as possible, if indeed that is the problem. I have some packs of Appy Life Var, so I'll use that on them and cross my fingers. So there you have it. My entire inspection routine for all 90 plus colonies last week. Just 3 inspections. If you are tempted to begin your season's inspections, try to have focus. Know why you're inspecting, know that it's required, and keep it to a minimum amount of time where you have your colonies open. Your bees will definitely thank you for it. Well, that's it for this week. For all of you who haven't yet signed up to my Patreon page, I, together with Steph, have been creating beekeeping content for many years now. And if you're looking for some straightforward, down-to-earth tips and techniques, help and advice, then do take a look at my Patreon page. We have over 1,700 individual beekeeping posts, videos and podcasts filled with useful and timely help and advice. My approach is pragmatic and calm, sometimes entertaining, but always with help and support for the beekeepers at the heart of what I do. I keep my videos short and concise wherever possible, no waffle, no flannel, just honest beekeeping advice from years of keeping bees. Take a look and join me for the new 2026 beekeeping season. It'll cost you less than a jar of honey, and you never know, there may be something there that will help improve your beekeeping. Check us out online at www.patreon.com/Norfolk Honey.